In the year 1983, the quiet town of Ashford, nestled among rolling hills and lined with old oak trees, life here moved slowly. Neighbors greeted each other by name. Children rode bikes down Main Street, and the little white church on the corner had stood for generations as the heart of the community. No one could have guessed that behind its stained glass windows and Sunday sermons, a dark story was unfolding, one that would forever change how Ashford saw itself and how its people learned to trust. The town of Ashford trusted Don Reeves with their souls. They never imagined he'd betray them with bloodshed. This is the story of a pastor's downfall and the 7 lives lost in its wake. In the small town of Ashford, Pastor Don Reeves was the heart of the community. For 15 years, he led his church with kindness and a friendly smile. People still remembered when he first arrived, fresh out of seminary school, full of energy that lit up the little white church on Main Street. His Sunday sermons were so moving that people packed the pews and even stood outside just to listen. He had a special way of making Bible stories feel like they were meant just for you. But Pastor Reeves did much more than preach. He ran food drives that fed hundreds, visited sick church members without being asked, and patiently sat through long church meetings. When the Johnson family lost their house in a fire, he quickly rallied the church to help rebuild it. Old Mrs. Carlisle, who lived alone with her cats, said Reeves was the only one who checked on her every winter. To the town, he was more than a pastor. He was their guide and moral example. Still, little problems were starting to show. The church treasurer noticed that Reeves sometimes took small amounts of cash from the church's petty fund and didn't pay it back for weeks. When $500 meant for the youth group went missing, Reeves just said the bill probably got lost. He also started coming late to meetings, blaming car trouble or family emergencies that no one could prove. Some choir members whispered that he often borrowed money from them, then avoided the topic when they asked for it back. Reeves was very good at changing the subject. If someone brought up missing money in a church meeting, he'd turn it into a talk about trust and faith. If they pushed harder, he'd get teary-eyed and talk about his mother's hospital bills. Because the town loved him so much for all the good he'd done, they were willing to overlook these warning signs. Then, things took a serious turn. The bank called the church about a loan that hadn't been paid. Reeves had taken a $25,000 personal loan using the church's tax ID number, claiming it was for fixing the roof, but no repairs were ever done. When they confronted him, Reeves admitted he'd used the money to pay off gambling debts, but begged for time to pay it back. The church board agreed to give him 2 months, not realizing this was only the start of bigger problems. By then, Reeves had already borrowed money from at least 6 elderly church members, telling each one they were putting money into a business deal that couldn't fail. The truth was, the pastor, who had always seemed so perfect, was hiding a pile of secrets, and he was running out of ways to keep them covered up. Behind his neat sermons and sharp suits, Pastor Reeves was drowning in money problems. What started as a few credit card bills had grown into $120,000 of debt spread across 12 different cards. On top of that, he took out a second mortgage on his house for his daughter's college, adding another $75,000. Each month, more overdue bills arrived, which he hid in a filing cabinet at the church. Trying to keep up his image as a successful pastor, Reeves made some desperate choices. He began treating some church members like his own cash machines. He told 68-year-old widower Henry Mills that his wife needed cancer treatment the insurance wouldn't pay for, and walked away with $15,000. The church secretary, Barbara Whitaker, handed him $8,000 after he said the church van urgently needed fixing. In total, at least 9 members later said they'd given him loans from $3,000 up to $25,000. Experts say money stress can make people do things they'd normally see as wrong. A 2018 study from the University of Cambridge found that people under financial pressure often justify worse and worse choices. For Reeves, each new lie became easier. He told 72-year-old Martha Sullivan that her money would pay for a church youth camp that never happened. When 80-year-old retired teacher Carl Jefferson asked about his $12,000 investment, Reeves showed him fake building permits for a church addition that didn't exist. 3 things helped Reeves pull off this scam. First, he went after older church members who deeply trusted pastors. Second, he always tied his requests to church needs, like mission trips, building repairs, or charity. Third, he leaned on his spotless reputation. When 65-year-old Deacon Harris mentioned the strange loans to his wife, she scolded him for doubting God's servant. But things started falling apart when retired nurse Edna Foster asked for her $18,000 back after 6 months without seeing any returns from her promised benevolence fund investment. Reeves made excuses about bank delays. When Foster insisted on seeing paperwork, Reeves made a huge mistake. He handed her a fake receipt with the church letterhead forged. Foster had been the church treasurer 20 years earlier. She immediately spotted that the letterhead was old and the signature wasn't from the current treasurer. When Foster confronted Reeves at church the next Sunday, he broke down crying right there in the foyer. He confessed the money was gone, but begged for more time to pay it back. As Foster walked to her car that day, she decided she would tell the church board everything at their next meeting. She didn't realize she had just become the first person to truly threaten Reeves's fragile web of lies, or how dangerously he might respond to protect it. Pastor Reeves's money lies set off a chain reaction that trapped him in his own web. What started as small excuses about late payments grew into a big pile of lies that he had to keep adding to. When the church board asked about the missing $25,000 loan, he told them the bank had made a mistake and he was fixing it. To back up that lie, he even created fake bank papers showing the debt was gone. But when the real bank statements came in, he had to invent even more lies to explain the differences. This kind of behavior is something experts know well. They call it the liar's dilemma. Each lie needs another lie to support it, like building a house of cards. Soon, Reeves was even lying about things that had nothing to do with money, just to keep his story from falling apart. When a deacon asked why he missed a meeting, Reeves said his mother was in the hospital. Then he had to skip other church events for a week to make it look true. He was telling so many lies that he kept a notebook just to remember them all. People started to notice that something was off. Reeves avoided eye contact when talking to people. His sermons, once clear and powerful, became confused and all over the place. Linda Patterson, who'd sung in the choir for years, noticed how he flinched whenever anyone mentioned money. One day, she casually asked about the new church sound system, paid for with money Reeves had claimed to borrow, and he quickly changed the topic to prayer requests. As the pressure built, Reeves's lies grew even darker. He told the church his wife had a rare blood disease that needed costly treatments. That explained why he suddenly needed $8,000 from the church's benevolence fund. But in reality, his wife was perfectly fine. He even faked a hospital scene, having someone call the church office pretending to be a nurse. When church elders offered to visit her, Reeves claimed the hospital had strict rules and wouldn't let them in because of infection risks. Later, financial expert Mark Williams, who studied the case, said Reeves took advantage of small-town trust. In close-knit places, people don't ask for proof, Williams explained. They just believe what someone says, especially if it's their pastor. This blind trust let Reeves keep up his scheme for nearly 2 years before people really started questioning him. The turning point came when church treasurer Alice Briggs asked for records for tax season. Reeves had told everyone the church donated $40,000 to mission work overseas, but Briggs couldn't find any evidence of these payments. When she pressed him, Reeves first blamed the mission group for bad bookkeeping. Then he said the money was sent to help with disaster relief. Finally, he admitted some of it had been temporarily used for other church bills. Briggs told him he had 48 hours to give her all the paperwork. As she walked out of his office that day, neither of them knew that her demand would set off something terrible. Reeves had run out of lies that could buy him more time. With a church board meeting coming up and Briggs ready to expose everything, he saw only 2 choices: come clean and lose everything, or find some other way to keep the truth buried. The choice he made would shock the whole town. The pressure on Pastor Reeves finally reached a breaking point in the first week of November. That Monday alone, 4 different people he owed money to called the church office looking for him. The bank also sent a final warning letter about the fake loan. Meanwhile, Alice Briggs set up a special meeting of the church elders for Thursday night to go through the financial records Reeves still hadn't handed over. To make matters worse, 3 elderly church members who had each given Reeves money ran into each other at the grocery store and started comparing stories. For the next few days, Reeves barely left his office. He paced the floor, scribbling down plans that all seemed hopeless. He thought about filing for bankruptcy, but that would show the bank loans were fake. He even considered running away, but knew too many people would recognize him. In total desperation, he drove 30 miles to try to get a payday loan, but they turned him down because his credit was so bad. Later, investigators looked at his notebook from that week. It was full of messy numbers and half-baked plans that didn't add up. Experts who study white-collar crime say this is common. A 2015 FBI report found that when people like Reeves are about to be exposed, around 12% turn to violence, often against those who know the secret. Reeves was a perfect example. On Wednesday night, he couldn't sleep. and his thoughts grew darker. Phone records showed he looked up gun stores after midnight, though he never bought a gun. His wife later told the police he was muttering about ending it all while staring at old church directories. Then, Thursday morning, everything got worse. Alice Briggs emailed him, saying she had already found parts of the financial records and saw serious problems. She listed the names of people like Foster, Jefferson, and Mills, all members who had given Reeves money. At 10:17 a.m., Reeves texted his secretary to cancel all his meetings for pastoral emergencies. At 11:45, he took out $1,200 in cash from the church account, telling the teller it was for a youth retreat. Security cameras showed him afterward in the parking lot, pacing and running his hands through his hair. That afternoon, Reeves drove 20 miles outside Ashford to a hardware store. Surveillance video caught him buying rope, duct tape, and a box of disposable gloves. He paid in cash and wore sunglasses even though the sky was cloudy. The store clerk later said Reeves kept checking his watch and peering out at the parking lot. At 3:30 p.m., Reeves texted Alice Briggs, saying he'd bring all the financial records to her house before the evening meeting, and insisted they go over everything privately first. By 5 p.m., Reeves had changed into dark clothes and loaded the items into his trunk. Phone records showed he made one last call to a number police think it was a prepaid burner phone, but no one answered. When his wife asked why he was taking the church van instead of his car, Reeves said it needed gas before Sunday. As he backed out of the driveway at 5:47 p.m., neither he nor his wife knew it was the last normal moment they would share. The meeting at Alice Briggs's house was set for 6:30, but Reeves showed up 40 minutes early, carrying a folder that looked like it held important documents, but was actually full of blank paper. He rang her doorbell with his left hand. In his right hand, hidden inside his jacket pocket, he held something meant to make sure no one at that night's church meeting would ever be able to speak about the church finances again. That Thursday evening in Ashford started out like any other. At 6 p.m., people were out walking their dogs along the quiet, tree-lined streets, and families were sitting down to dinner. The church van drove past several houses, and no one thought anything of it. Pastor Reeves often visited church members in the evenings. No one noticed when he parked a little down the street from Alice Briggs's two-story home instead of right in her driveway. Reeves went in through her back door at 6:22 p.m., earlier than they had planned to meet. Alice was in the kitchen making coffee when he quietly came inside. Neighbors later said they heard raised voices around 6:30, but no one called the police. Reeves used the rope he had bought at the hardware store. Investigators later found that he attacked Alice from behind while she was reaching into a cupboard. Marks on her wrists matched knots Reeves had diagrams for on his phone. He left Alice's house at 6:58 p.m. wearing cleaning gloves he took from under her sink. Cameras at the church captured him walking in through a side door at 7:12 p.m. This was when the killings became carefully planned. The Thursday night prayer group always met in the fellowship hall at 7:30, and Reeves knew exactly who would show up early. 72-year-old Martha Sullivan usually came at 7:15 to set up chairs. When she walked in, Reeves was waiting behind the door with a fire extinguisher from the church basement. Forensics later showed how Reeves moved through the building as others arrived. He met Deacon Harris in the parking lot and told him they needed to look at financial papers first. Harris followed him inside to the boiler room, where Reeves had already placed duct tape and more rope. Harris's phone stopped sending signals at 7:34 p.m. The last person to arrive was Edna Foster. Her car pulled into the parking lot at 7:42 p.m. She was carrying the papers that proved Reeves's fraud, planning to show them to the group that night. Security cameras caught her walking to the church doors with a folder under her arm. Crime scene photos later showed streaks on the fellowship hall floor where someone had been dragged. At 8:15 p.m., a woman jogging by noticed how strangely quiet the church was. Normally, by then, the prayer group would be singing. She saw the side door partly open and called inside, but no one answered. When she stepped in to check, she smelled strong cleaning chemicals and followed the scent to the boiler room. What she found, 4 bodies tied up and laid in a row, made her run to a nearby house to call 911. Police got there at 8:29 p.m. They secured the scene and found Reeves sitting alone at the pulpit in the dark sanctuary, just staring at his hands. His clothes didn't have obvious blood on them, but later tests found small traces on his shoes. The first officer to walk in said Reeves looked up for a moment when the doors opened, then went back to silently waiting, almost like he expected a Sunday service to start. What the police didn't know yet was that Reeves had more names written in his office calendar, 3 more people's names with their addresses circled for visits on Friday. The next page even listed careful plans for getting rid of evidence and a shopping list of supplies. But with the discovery of those 4 bodies that night, Reeves's deadly spree came to an abrupt end. As officers walked slowly down the aisle toward him, hands near their weapons, The pastor, who had spent years earning the town's trust, now faced the total collapse of everything he'd built. A patrol car's dash cam outside caught his last moments of freedom. Streetlights throwing long shadows across the church lawn where kids had once eaten ice cream just a summer ago, before handcuffs clicked shut on his wrists. The county sheriff arrived at the church by 8:45 p.m., joining 6 officers already there. Inside the boiler room, they found 4 bodies, each with their hands tied behind their backs. Later, medical examiners confirmed they all died the same way, suffocated by duct tape from the same roll found nearby. At first, there was confusion, but it quickly turned into horror when deputies realized 2 of the victims were Alice Briggs and Martha Sullivan, women everyone in Ashford knew from years of church work. Investigators soon spotted Pastor Reeves sitting quietly in the sanctuary. While officers and crime scene teams rushed around him, Reeves just sat there, calm and still. When a deputy asked what had happened, Reeves simply replied, "God's will," and wouldn't say more. They found fresh bleach marks on his shirt cuffs and tiny blood traces on his shoes that later matched blood in Alice Briggs's kitchen. Even stronger evidence came from his own office. The church van keys were on his desk, and those keys matched tire marks found at Alice's house. The sheriff's team worked through the night, following paper trails. By morning, they had uncovered Reeves's financial lies. Computer experts recovered deleted files that showed he owed over $300,000, much of it to people in his own church. Detectives also found handwritten notes about upcoming meetings with Alice Briggs and Edna Foster. One note chillingly read, "Must settle accounts before Thursday meeting." Forensic accountant Linda Pierce went through the church's books. She discovered Reeves had been stealing money for almost 2 years, making fake bills for building repairs that never happened. Bank records matched cash withdrawals to the same amounts he owed members of the congregation. This wasn't something done on impulse, Pierce said. The pastor kept careful records of every dollar he took and every lie he told to cover it up. When police questioned Reeves, at first he claimed the victims had attacked him. But when detectives showed him security footage putting him at Alice's house before the murders, and then more evidence linking him to all 4 crime scenes, Reeves finally confessed. They were going to ruin everything, he told them. All I ever did was serve that church. Police also found searches on his computer like untraceable poisons and how long bleach destroys DNA. They uncovered printed maps with 3 more church members' homes circled. These were all older people who had lent Reeves money. His calendar even had the words "tie up loose ends" written in red under the date of the killings. Reeves never explained that note in court, but prosecutors said it was clearly his plan to hurt more people. By dawn, news trucks filled the courthouse parking lot as the small town of Ashford tried to understand how their trusted pastor could do something so awful. Church members who came that morning for prayer were shocked to see yellow crime scene tape blocking the sanctuary doors. A deputy stood by the bulletin table where handouts still lay stacked for Thursday night's Bible study that would never happen. Inside, investigators moved quietly under the stained glass windows, which slowly glowed brighter as the sun came up. The same windows Reeves had proudly dedicated 6 years earlier, back when no one could have imagined what he was truly capable of. The news about Pastor Reeves's crimes hit Ashford like a punch to the stomach. At first, many people refused to believe it. Longtime church member Richard Malone told reporters, "I sat beside Don at potlucks for 12 years. This must be a mistake." But as more details came out about the money he stole and the murders he carefully planned, the town's shock turned into something darker. The church parking lot turned into a memorial, with photos of the victims stacked against the locked doors and flowers left by heartbroken neighbors. For the families of those killed, the pain was even deeper. Alice Briggs's daughter started going through her mother's old papers, wondering if every kind thing Reeves ever did was really just part of his plan. Martha Sullivan's grandchildren had to explain to their own kids why Grandma wouldn't be at Sunday school anymore. The prayer group victims left behind widowers who had once sat happily with Reeves at church picnics, enjoying his famous barbecue ribs. Experts say when a religious leader breaks trust, it hurts worse than most other betrayals. Dr. Eleanor Pratt, a psychologist who studies trauma, explained, when someone trusted by the community abuses that trust, it shakes people's basic beliefs about what's good and safe. In Ashford, you could see this clearly. Some people stopped going to any church at all. Others became overly careful, double-checking local charities before giving a dime. The hardware store where Reeves bought the rope and duct tape lost customers, and the owner even moved those items to the very back so people wouldn't have to see them. The town itself split over what to do next. Some people wanted the church torn down completely. Others thought it should stay open as a kind of memorial. At town meetings, arguments got loud and painful. Survivors shouted at the few people who still defended Reeves. Former deacon Gerald Holt said, "We'd known each other for 30 years, but suddenly neighbors wouldn't speak because of fights over whether the choir should sing Reeves's favorite hymns anymore." Money troubles followed the emotional pain. The church faced lawsuits from the victims' families and investigations into the fake loans Reeves took out. House prices fell because no one wanted to live near what people started calling the murder church. The local diner where Reeves once led Bible studies lost half its lunch business. Even the annual fall festival saw far fewer visitors. Attendance dropped by 40% the next year. Healing came, but only slowly and never fully. The church eventually reopened under a new name with new leaders. A grief counselor started holding weekly sessions in the same fellowship hall where the killings took place. The town planted 4 dogwood trees in the parking lot, one for each person lost. Still, some scars didn't go away. The new church financial team created a strict rule. 3 people now had to sign off on any withdrawal over $100. Some former members still tensed up when they heard the old hymns Reeves loved. The most telling sign was when the new pastor suggested bringing back the Thursday night prayer group. No one signed up. The spot where Martha Sullivan used to arrange the chairs stayed empty, with the folding tables stacked away in storage. As Reeves's trial date got close, the town divided again. Some people planned to go to the courthouse, hoping to finally get some answers. Others said they couldn't stand to see Reeves's face ever again. But everyone agreed on one thing. The man they once trusted with their deepest faith had stolen far more than just 4 lives. He had taken away Ashford's sense of safety, right from the place they had always gone to feel protected. The trial promised more details, but not the kind that could truly heal the town. No prison sentence would bring back what was lost, and no one could really explain how the same man who once baptized their children could later plot to kill their grandparents. That question hung over Ashford like a dark cloud, just like the bare patches in the church lawn where flowers kept dying, no matter how many times people replanted them. The trial of Pastor Don Reeves began 8 months after the murders. It was held in the same county courthouse where Reeves had once performed weddings. Prosecutors laid out a clear case. Bank records showed he had stolen over $300,000 from people in his own church, and forensic evidence tied him directly to all 4 murder scenes. Reeves's lawyers tried to argue he was temporarily insane, blaming heavy debts and untreated depression. A psychiatrist the court brought in said Reeves did show signs of having a narcissistic personality disorder, but he was still legally sane when he killed those people. For 12 days, the jury listened to painful details. They saw crime scene photos of the boiler room where Reeves left the victims. They heard his calm confession on tape, explaining how he planned each killing. The most powerful piece of evidence was a handwritten list titled "Silence These," with each victim's name checked off. When Alice Briggs's daughter testified, she held up the fake church letter Reeves had given her mother, the outdated logo proving it was fake. Her voice broke when she said, "He didn't just kill her, he made her doubt her own eyes first." Experts watching the case said it was similar to other crimes where pastors stole money and then turned violent. Professor Mark Henderson, who studies crimes by church leaders, explained that many of these cases involve 3 things: financial stress, a self-centered personality, and easy access to trusting victims. He said about 14% of these pastors actually become violent when they fear being caught. But Reeves's case was worse because of how carefully he planned it. The duct tape, the way he set up the boiler room, and that kill list. It was no surprise that the jury needed less than 6 hours to find him guilty on all charges. At sentencing, the judge talked about how Reeves's betrayal was an extraordinary breach of trust. Reeves was given 4 life sentences, 1 for each victim, with no chance of getting out on parole. Families of the victims stood up to speak, describing empty chairs at their dinner tables and grandchildren who still woke up from nightmares. Reeves didn't react to any of it. When given a chance to speak, he only said in a flat voice, "I thought I was saving the church." He didn't even look at the families. Prison records later showed Reeves turned down every visit request from journalists and researchers. Today, he is in a maximum security prison that houses well-known criminals. His days are simple: cleaning work, short times in the yard, and meals. The prison staff says he gets no mail and strangely never goes to religious services, even though he was once a pastor. Other inmates avoid him or look down on him because many prisoners see harming elderly people as especially low. Back in Ashford, the town is still trying to move on from what happened. The new church leaders keep their money records very clear and open for anyone to see. The old boiler room where the murders took place is now just a locked storage room with bright lights, but some church members still jump if a door creaks nearby. During Sunday services, certain hymns are skipped because they were Reeves's favorites. No one argues about this. It's like an unspoken rule. People also avoid parking in the spot where Alice Briggs's car was found that awful night. All these small habits show how the town still carries the weight of Reeves's crimes. On paper, the trial gave them justice, but in their hearts, the people of Ashford are still healing. Reeves may be locked away far from town, but the shadow of what he did is still there. In the extra caution before trusting someone new, the careful checks of church money records, and the uneasy feeling people get when they pass by the remodeled fellowship hall. The story of Pastor Don Reeves shows just how quickly trust can be shattered. For years, he won people over with kind gestures and friendly words, all while secretly stealing money from his own church members. When the truth started to come out, instead of admitting what he did, he chose to kill the very people who trusted him most. This case teaches a hard lesson about judging someone's character. It shows that a warm smile and a good reputation can sometimes hide terrible things. Even now, years later, the people of Ashford still live with the damage he caused. Their trust is broken in ways that might never fully heal. It makes you wonder, could someone have noticed the warning signs sooner? And if you had been part of that church, would you have questioned the man everyone else admired? Some betrayals are so deep they change people forever. That's what happened in Ashford, where one pastor's lies and violence left scars that still shape the town's everyday life.